Welcome to this exploration of one of the most unsettling instances in Ozark Mountain history. Please let me know where you're watching from and what time you're listening to this narration in the comments section before we start. The locations and times of day or night that these recorded accounts reach are of interest to us. Deep within the western edge of the Ozark Range, in the shadow of Tumyam Mountain, stood a cabin that the locals would later deny existed. Although there is still a deed from 1,873 inches, Shannon County, Missouri, indicating that a man named Josiah Williams had purchased 40 acres, the family's name appears to have disappeared from the county's records in the spring of 1889. Only a tiny dirt route that ran through thick oak and hickory woodlands led to the cabin, which was about 7 miles from the closest town of Eminence, Missouri. In an attempt to forget what could not be explained, what transpired on that isolated hillside has been methodically erased from local histories, newspapers, and even church records. Fragments of the Williams narrative did not come to light again until 1957 when Dr. Lawrence Pritchard, a historian at the University of Missouri, discovered a set of sealed testimonies in the basement of the Shannon County Courthouse. Pritchard never published the results of his later studies. Access to his notes has been repeatedly refused by the institution since they were preserved in 1961. However, despite mounting signs that something was seriously off at the Williams farm, the testimonials depict a troubling picture of a family gradually becoming isolated in the community's unwillingness to step in. From these accounts, surviving correspondence, and local records that were not purged, the following story has been pieced together. In the fall of 1872, Josiah Williams made his first trip to Shannon County, according to land registry records. He came by himself and spent about 2 weeks in the only boarding house in Eminence, looking at the available land parcels. Sarah Jenkins, the boarding house keeper, later claimed that Williams was always kind but aloof, frequently coming after midnight with water and soil samples gathered from different places. The only information he shared about his background was that he had moved from Illinois in search of a new beginning for his family due to unfavorable circumstances. Records of the county clerk show that Williams spent 3 days looking at various parcels before deciding on a 40-acre area of land that the locals had always shunned. A trapper called Harlan Moss had once owned the area, but he abruptly left it in 1868, leaving behind a cabin that had only been partially built. Williams reportedly said, "I require privacy for my family's peace of mind." When asked why he chose to pay with gold coins that multiple witnesses described as worn smooth, as if handled for many years. Despite the fact that better land was available closer to town, the Moss property had a tumultuous past which Williams either was unaware of or possibly understood all too well. Moss himself had only been seen in Eminence once after leaving the property, looking confused and saying something was coming up through the earth. The local Osage guides had apparently refused to approach the area, calling it in their language, the place where the ground speaks. Moss left for Street Louis the next day and was never heard from again. Early in the spring of 1873, Williams and his family wife Martha, daughter Elizabeth, 14, son Samuel, 10, and baby Thomas, returned. They came in a covered wagon with simple belongings, tools, home goods, and a few closed trunks that stood out for their odd weight. While Josiah built a makeshift shelter on their land, the family spent 2 weeks at Eminence's only boarding house. Later in her notebook, boarding housekeeper Sarah Jenkins gave one of the first in-depth descriptions of the family. She saw that, even in their private room, Martha Williams never spoke and always kept the baby covered. The woman tends to the baby with mechanical precision. Jenkins wrote, "But I have yet to see her smile at it or speak endearing words, as most mothers do." Jenkins also noted that Elizabeth and Samuel appeared unusually quiet for children of their age, only talking when they were directly addressed, and spending hours staring out the window toward their new property without saying anything. Jenkins's finding on their sleeping patterns was the most intriguing. The entire family retires early but rises at irregular hours of the night. I have heard them moving about their rooms at 2 or 3 in the morning and the sound of water being poured repeatedly. By dawn, they appear to have slept little, yet show no signs of fatigue during the day. The Williams had set up their residence by the summer of 1873. Using his carpentry abilities, Josiah built a two-room cabin with peculiar features that guests noticed. Windows positioned unusually high, walls thicker than those of conventional frontier homes, and a root cellar with a door that was locked with several locks. Purchases of supplies in line with these findings are documented in the ledgers of local merchants, along with amounts of salt that greatly surpassed typical family preservation requirements. Throughout their first year, the family had little interaction with the Eminence community. Every month, Josiah would come buy supplies, often with the two elder kids in tow. According to school records, Elizabeth was uncommonly bright but reserved, and she attended the local school occasionally. Her attendance grew increasingly irregular, as evidenced by the school register, which is kept in the county historical archives. She last attended classes in November 1873. According to teacher Abigail Foster's personal journal, Samuel seemed to be always tired and jumped at unexpected sounds. In one preserved example dated the 12th of October 1873, Samuel wrote, "At night the ground breathes beneath our house. Father says not to listen, but I cannot help it. Elizabeth says the breathing is calling our names." Foster expressed particular concern about Samuel's compositions, which frequently featured themes of things moving beneath the ground and voices that call from deep places. Neither child made friends with local kids or took part in community activities. During a harvest party in October 1873, Elizabeth allegedly told a student that we cannot leave Thomas alone with what watches from below. Throughout the family's whole stay in the area, Martha Williams made just 3 recorded visits in Eminence, making her an unusual sight. The first was to buy fabric and sewing supplies in June 1873. Mary Thornton, the storekeeper, noted an odd request in her ledger. Martha wanted to buy any available mirror or reflective surface, and she ended up buying every hand mirror that was available. Thornton noted that Martha immediately wrapped the mirrors in dark linen, avoiding looking into them herself. In December 1873, Harrison Miller, a local physician, made a house call to the Williams residence to treat Martha for what Josiah described as nervous exhaustion. According to Dr. Miller's notes, in spite of hearing concerning respiratory sounds from the curtained cradle, he was not allowed to examine infant Thomas. Despite her physical exhaustion, the doctor also noted that Martha had unusual strength when agitated, needing to be restrained by her husband when Miller tried to approach the baby. Dr. Miller's assessment of the cabin's interior was arguably the most unsettling. The walls have been inscribed with unusual markings that Mr. Williams attributed to his daughter's artistic tendencies. These markings, however, appear systematic rather than decorative, and are concentrated around the doors, windows, and particularly the entrance to the root cellar. The family has also adopted the peculiar habit of placing small containers of salt in each corner of the dwelling and across every threshold. The first genuinely strange behavior at the Williams farm started in the summer of 1874. Josiah started constructing a well a quarter-mile away in a tiny area encircled by thick undergrowth, rather than close to the cabin as was traditional. Williams' well site, located above no known water table or spring line, advised against digging, but was dismissed with some hostility. Cooper's official survey notes, filed with the county land office, contain an interesting addendum. Observed children watching from forest edge, unusually still and silent. The woman was singing what sounded like a lullaby, though no words were distinguishable. Josiah explained that water tasted sweeter in that specific spot. Cooper later told Dr. Pritchard in 1957 about an uncomfortable encounter he had with Elizabeth Williams when departing the property, which he had left out of his official report. At the boundary line, the girl whispered to Cooper, "Father isn't digging for water. He's making a door that opens both ways." When Cooper asked her what she meant, the girl allegedly smiled in a way he described as wholly wrong, as though the expression had been explained to her but never practiced, and said, "Thomas needs to talk to what lives in the deep places, and It appears that the well was finished by the fall of 1874. Josiah started selling extra water in Eminence. claiming it had therapeutic qualities that drew in residents with a range of illnesses. At least 6 purchases of Williams spring water, with clients reporting better digestion and more clarity of thought, are documented in merchant William Pierce's ledger. In a letter to his sister in St. Bloom, Pierce himself sampled the water and characterized it as tasteless, yet somehow satisfying beyond normal thirst. Constance Murray, an elderly widow, experienced a more dramatic impact. According to church documents, Murray reported having vivid dreams in which she spoke to her late husband as though he were present in the room after consuming the Williams water for 3 days. Murray kept buying the water every week until she started talking in 2 voices at once, according to her neighbors, and was eventually sent to Springfield to live with her daughter. In the Ozarks, the winter of 1875 was exceptionally severe. When Reverend Isaiah Blackwood tried to visit the Williams in January 1875, he expressed worries. But the Williams stayed at their property despite the fact that many outlying households temporarily relocated to eminence. Despite significant snow accumulation in the surrounding areas, his church notebook describes discovering the path to their cottage entirely free of snow. He saw smoke coming from the chimney when he arrived at the property, but no one answered his calls. He saw what he described as a figure too tall to be a child, yet moving with unnatural gait, as he was about to depart, and it vanished behind the hut. The Reverend was disturbed and left without looking into it further. Blackwood explained his uneasiness in a private letter to a seminary colleague in St. Louis that was saved in the records of the Archdiocese. I cannot explain the profound sense of wrongness that pervaded the Williams property. The air itself felt thick, resistant to movement, and carried an odor I can only describe as similar to the mineral springs near Alton, yet somehow inverted. Not the smell of earth elements reaching the surface, but rather of surface elements being drawn downward. Most disturbing was the silence. No birds sang, no insects sounded. Even the wind seemed to die at the property's edge. Josiah returned to town once a month in the spring, bringing his water and some homemade furniture to sell. The furniture was praised for its unique designs and high quality, including asymmetrical back chairs, cabinets with concealed storage, and tables with strange inlaid patterns that some customers found disorienting to look at for too long. In spite of their quirks, the family made a good living from the sales. The wood itself appears to have been somehow altered. Though identifiable as local oak, it has a density and grain pattern I've not encountered in 30 years of woodworking, wrote Thomas Jenkins, a local carpenter who had no connection to the boarding house keeper. After examining one of Williams' tables, what's most intriguing are the inlaid designs, which appear to change slightly when viewed peripherally versus directly. The patterns create an optical effect of depth where none exists, suggesting a technique unknown to me. Elizabeth Williams completely stopped going to school during this time. Concerned about the girl's disappearance, teacher Abigail Foster paid a visit to the Williams home in April 1875. She wrote in her notebook that she discovered Elizabeth by herself in the cabin, doing what looked to be cleaning with just clear water, no soap or lye. The girl frequently referred to her youngest brother as the other instead of by name and talked in short, rambling words. When Foster asked to see Martha or the baby, Elizabeth became agitated, insisting they were at the feeding place and could not be disturbed. Foster's journal entry continues. The girl's appearance has altered dramatically since I last saw her in class. She has grown several inches taller, yet her movements suggest discomfort with her own body, as if her limbs respond to her intentions with slight delay. Her complexion has taken on a waxy quality, and her eyes seem to focus at a point beyond whatever she looks at directly. Most disturbing was her behavior as I prepared to leave. She grasped my wrist with surprising strength and said, "Teacher, do you hear it?" The humming from below. When I responded in the negative, she nodded as if this confirmed something and said, "Only those who drink see. Only those who drink hear. Father says, we mustn't tell what comes up through the well at night, but Thomas says, secrets are a child's game." She then released me and returned to her cleaning, as if our exchange had never occurred. Shortly after, Foster left, observing that Elizabeth, who had just moments before informed Foster that she was not allowed to leave the cottage, was heading unevenly toward the path that led deeper into the woods. Reverend Blackwood heard Foster's worries and conferred with Sheriff Thomas Consincade. However, since the family had not violated any laws and frontier privacy was normally respected, no formal action was taken. Nonetheless, the sheriff gave his deputy instructions to keep an eye on Josiah's town visits and record any odd conduct. Samuel Williams had similarly stopped going to school by the summer of 1875. During a visit to Eminence, Josiah was asked by Deputy Sheriff Robert Hayes why he needed both children at home to help with an expansion of their cabin and special care for Thomas, whose constitution remains delicate. Hayes also observed that Josiah's once tidy appearance had deteriorated. His hands were sore from work, his clothing was smeared with what seemed like mineral deposits, and his speaking style was oddly measured, as though every word had to be carefully chosen. Additionally, Hayes saw that Williams now wore a unique pendant made of rough river stone with odd striations that appear to change depending on the angle from which it is viewed, rather than something ornamental. Williams reportedly clutched it protectively when questioned about it, saying merely that it keeps the balance between above and below. An odd incident that happened in September 1875 sparked more inquiries concerning the Williams family. A youngster singing was heard coming from the direction of the Williams' distant well by a hunting group that was tracking deer. They moved slowly closer and saw Martha Williams standing next to the well, dropping what looked like a bundle of fabric on a rope. The story they told Dr. Pritchard years later states that Martha was singing in no language we recognized, though the melody seemed to call something upward rather than soothing something below. She stopped instantly upon seeing the hunters and gazed at them with an expression one man described as knowing something terrible about each of us. They backed off without saying anything to her. After considering reporting the incident, the hunting party opted against it because they didn't want to meddle in personal family affairs. However, one of the group members brought it up to his cousin, Dr. Miller, who added the story to his expanding collection of oddities about Williams. This file, which was found among Miller's belongings after his death in 1912, may be the most thorough modern account of the family's increasing estrangement and peculiar habits. Multiple secondhand reports of strange events at the Williams property during 1875 and 1876 are included in Dr. Miller's notes. These include lights moving in patterns through the forest at night, sounds that are alternately described as singing, humming, or mechanical grinding coming from the well site, and the mysterious disappearance of livestock from nearby properties. Reports of the family members being seen concurrently in various places were the most consistent. In particular, Martha Williams was spotted in the cabin, and it seemed, at the well. Although there were no incidents reported during the winter of 1875-1876, merchant ledgers revealed that Josiah was buying more chains, salt, and lamp oil than was reasonable for everyday household use. For the first time in almost a year, Elizabeth, who is now 17 years old, was spotted in town with her father by the spring. In her diary entry from the 14th of April, 1876, shopkeeper Mary Thornton describes the girl as much altered, taller certainly, but moving with difficulty, as if her joints pain her. Her complexion has a translucent quality, and her eyes seem to focus beyond whatever she looks at. When she spoke, asking for sewing needles, her voice had an echo quality, as if two voices sounded just slightly apart. Thornton also reported that Elizabeth's hands had unusual markings, not tattoos precisely, but rather a pattern of slight discoloration that followed her veins, making them prominently visible beneath the skin, creating the effect of blue-black branching beneath the surface, reaching to her fingertips. Elizabeth reportedly covered her hands when Thornton made this comment, responding, "Only Thomas says the patterns help it find its way through us." Samuel kept going to town with his father on occasion during 1876. According to a number of accounts, the 3-year-old boy had started speaking in an odd way, frequently pausing in the middle of sentences, as though he was listening to something that other people couldn't hear. According to school records, Abigail Foster made 2 more attempts to visit the Williams property to encourage Samuel to resume his education, but was denied each time by Josiah, who maintained that the boy was learning things of greater importance than books can teach. Foster claimed to have heard what sounded like several voices reciting in unison from the direction of the root cellar. Foster reported that the voices she heard numbered more than 2 and spoke no words I recognized as English or any European language familiar to me. Josiah responded that it was Samuel practicing his letters with Elizabeth. In November 1876, local hunter Jeremiah Collins wrote of a disturbing encounter with Samuel. Collins came upon the youngster gathering water from a little brook as he was tracking a wounded deer close to the Williams farm. When asked if he had seen a wounded deer pass through, Samuel reportedly responded, "It went to the well. Everything goes to the well, eventually. The water below is hungry." Disturbed by the encounter, Collins tried to follow the deer's trail but found it ended abruptly at the edge of the clearing containing the Williams well. Collins also described Samuel as unnaturally still, like he was listening constantly, and observed that the boy's eyes had a film over them, similar to cataracts but shifting like oil on water. He described feeling pressure as he got closer to the well, as though he was falling quickly in altitude, and hearing a low humming that seemed to come from the ground itself. He left without doing any more research, and he later told Dr. Miller that for a few weeks after that, he had dreams in which he went back to the well and saw hands reaching up from below, too many fingers on each. The Williams family continued to live a solitary life through 1877 and 1878. Their only known interaction with the community came from Josiah's monthly visits to town. Williams paid his assessments on time, according to county tax records from this time period, but always in unusual form. Small gold nuggets rather than coins or banknotes. When asked where he got them, he said he got them from a small stream on his property, but geological surveys of the area showed no known gold deposits. In response to continuous reports of strange behavior, Deputy Hayes carried out an informal survey of the Williams property line in the summer of 1879. Dr. Pritchard found his personal journal, which details his hours-long observation of the family from a distance. J. Williams and male child, presumably Samuel, engaged in expanding structure adjacent to main cabin. Female child, presumably Elizabeth, not visible. Williams observed, moving between cabin and direction of well approximately every hour, carrying what appears to be a covered bucket each time. Most notable is complete absence of normal homestead sounds. No chickens, no livestock. Property appears oddly contained, as if existing separately from surrounding forest. Wildlife abundant to property edge, but does not cross boundary. Birdsong ceases within approximately 20 yards of clearing. As evening approached, observed unusual light emanating from well clearing, not consistent with lantern or fire. Rather, a diffuse glow described as similar to foxfire, but blue-white in color. Did not investigate closer due to growing discomfort and sensation of being observed. Despite no visible watchers, the 1880 drought was when the Williams well became more widely known. Josiah's isolated well evidently continued to produce a plenty of water, which he now sold at premium prices in Eminence, despite the failure of water supplies throughout Shannon County. Several customers remarked on the water's peculiar qualities, including the fact that it boiled without leaving any mineral deposits, stayed cool for days without ice, and appeared to quench thirst with lower amounts than regular water. After obtaining a sample for analysis, Dr. Miller recorded his results. The liquid appears to be water by all observable characteristics, yet behaves differently under certain conditions. It does not freeze solid at expected temperatures, instead developing a crystalline matrix throughout while remaining partially fluid. Most curious is its effect on plant life. Vegetation watered with the Williams liquid grows with unusual speed, but develops structural abnormalities, particularly exaggerated root systems that display geotropic confusion, growing in spiral patterns rather than downward. Intrigued by these features and in need of water for his cattle, local farmer Ezekiel Thompson asked Josiah if he might go to the well immediately. Thompson's subsequent testimony states that Josiah strongly objected, saying the road was dangerous and protected by guardians that would attack strangers. This surprising reaction, together with the fact that the Williams were known to not own dogs or other animals, sparked Thompson's suspicions. When Josiah was known to be in town in September 1880, Thompson persuaded storekeeper William Pierce and blacksmith Harold Jenkins to go with him to look into the Williams property. Their unsettling discovery is detailed in their sealed testimony, which was only released in 1957. We approached from the north ridge to avoid being seen from the cabin. At approximately 200 yards from the main dwelling, we heard singing a woman's voice, but the melody was unlike any hymn or folk song familiar to us. The voice seemed to shift in pitch in ways that made listening uncomfortable. Following the sound, we came upon a small clearing where Martha Williams stood beside an open well, roughly 4 feet in diameter, and lined with stones of a dark color, not common to the region. She was lowering what appeared to be a small bundle wrapped in cloth into the well with a rope. The bundle moved in a manner suggesting it contained something alive. Upon noticing our presence, she ceased her singing immediately. Her expression was not one of anger or fear, but rather a strange serenity that was somehow more disturbing. She simply stated, "He needs his feeding," and began walking back toward the cabin without another word or backward glance. Jenkins suggested we examine the well, but something in the woman's manner discouraged us. As we departed, Pierce claimed to hear a sound like distant humming rising from the well. Though Thompson and I detected nothing, we agreed not to speak of what we had witnessed, though none of us could articulate precisely why. Only days later, after drinking a lot of whiskey at the local bar, Pierce told other customers about the incident, breaking the men's vow to keep quiet. Dr. Miller's examination revealed no physical cause for Pierce's condition, although he did note that his eyes displayed unusual dilation that did not respond to light changes. Pierce recovered after a few days, but he claimed to have no memory of the incident or the visit to the Williams property. The next morning, Pierce was discovered in the street outside a store, disoriented and repeating the phrase, "It knows we saw." In 1957, Dr. Pritchard asked the elderly Thompson why the guys had remained silent during his interview. Some things aren't meant for explaining. After that day, we understood the Williams were to be left alone. There are places in these hills where the ground doesn't feel right underfoot, where the air hangs differently. The old folks before us knew to avoid such places. We should have remembered that. Thompson also disclosed a detail that was left out of the original testimony. All 3 men felt something following just behind, even though nothing was visible, as they left the property. When we turned to look, this presence seemed to cease at the creek marking the property boundary, after which Jenkins discovered an unusual stone in his pocket that none of the men recalled collecting. The stone, which Thompson called dark with lighter veins that seemed to move when not looked at directly, was thrown into the water. Thompson said the water didn't splash right, moved too slow, like honey, instead of water. Documentation of the Williams family becomes more and more irregular after this occurrence, indicating that locals made a conscious attempt to limit interaction. When Thornton gasped involuntarily, Elizabeth quickly covered her hands in gloves and whispered, "We are changing to better hear what speaks from below." The storekeeper's wife reported that the young woman moved with visible difficulty and spoke only once, in a voice that seemed to come from somewhere other than her throat. The most unsettling detail was one that was documented in Mary Thornton's diary, but left out of her public accounts. Elizabeth's hands, when she reached for purchased items, displayed significant structural alterations, elongated fingers with apparently additional joints, and skin with a translucent quality that revealed movements beneath that corresponded to no normal anatomy. The 7-year-old Samuel Williams completely ceased going to town with his father. Only in the spring of 1881 was Elizabeth supposedly spotted again, going with Josiah to buy unusual quantities of salt and lamp oil. Thomas changed first and shows us the way. Victor Holloway, the county assessor, visited the Williams property for his biannual visit in July, 1,881 inches order to update tax records. His personal notebook, which his daughter presented to the Missouri Historical Society in 1923, gives a more disturbing account than his official report, which only mentions that the family had expanded their cabin with an unusual addition that extended partially underground. Williams' property presents a scene of neglect externally, with fields only partially tended and livestock absent, despite previous registration of 2 cows and 6 chickens. The cabin addition appears to be constructed as a cellar or basement with unusual depth, accessed through a heavy trap door in the floor of the main dwelling. Williams himself appears significantly aged beyond his years, with a pallor suggesting illness or malnutrition. When questioned about his health, he responded only that he carries the weight of necessary knowledge. Martha Williams was present, but spoke not a single word throughout my visit, standing motionless by the hearth. Neither Elizabeth nor young Samuel was visible, and the infant Thomas, who would now be approximately 8 years of age, was not in evidence. Most concerning was the sound emanating from below the trapdoor, a rhythmic scraping that Williams attributed to settling of the new walls, though it gave the distinct impression of movement. When I expressed interest in inspecting the addition for proper valuation, Williams became agitated, insisting that what's below stays below, and offering to pay additional tax without inspection. As I prepared to depart, I observed a figure watching from the tree line, approximately 50 yards from the cabin, tall and unnaturally thin, possibly female based on the long hair visible even at that distance. When I commented on this presence, Williams looked alarmed and hurried me to my horse, pressing an unusual stone into my hand as I mounted. "Carry this until you cross the creek," he instructed. "It remembers you've been here and won't follow if you carry it." Holloway indulged what he took to be superstition and carried the stone as directed. When he crossed the creek that runs along the edge of the property, he looked at the item, a smooth river stone with unusual veining that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. I discarded it in the creek as its appearance caused a sensation of unease. Holloway didn't ever come back to the Williams house. He retired from his job after his following assessment reports state that the parcel was inaccessible due to weather conditions for 2 consecutive assessment periods. Holloway provided one cryptic caution about the Williams property on the western ridge in a letter to his successor that Dr. Pritchard found. Accept payment without inspection. Some thresholds, once crossed, allow passage in both directions. Josiah Williams continued to visit Eminence once a month between 1882 and 1887. Although witnesses said he became more unkempt and reclusive, crude, hurriedly made furniture that seldom sold, replaced his formerly exquisite pieces. However, he persisted in buying odd items, such as lengths of chain that didn't seem necessary for everyday household use, enormous amounts of lamp oil, and salt. He stopped selling water from his well because it had developed a taste not suited for others. During this time, a number of incidences happened that were eventually connected by Dr. Pritchard's research, even though they were not officially connected to the Williams family. Between 1883 and 1886, 3 children from nearby properties vanished. They were last saw strolling toward the Williams property. None of the children were located, although a piece of clothing belonging to one was found at the edge of the creek marking the Williams property line. Search parties were organized, but they specifically avoided the Williams property, a decision Sheriff Kincaid later attributed to respecting boundaries, but which several search party members described as an unspoken understanding that some places shouldn't be disturbed. The fabric, a child's hair ribbon, was in the most distressing state. The mother testified that it looked partially absorbed into a stone, as if the rock had grown around it. In 1884, local physician Dr. Miller made an effort to interact with Williams on a professional level, voicing concerns about the family's well-being due to their remote location and Williams' declining physical state. Miller's notes indicate that Williams' reaction was unexpectedly hostile. When asked about his children's welfare, Williams allegedly said, "Elizabeth has adapted completely, and Samuel is fighting what he will eventually embrace," which the doctor found absurd but unsettling. "What flows through my family now is not for your understanding. Your medicines would only dilute what must remain pure." There is a concerning note in Miller's last entry about the Williams family, made in November 1884. Encountered J. Williams at Thompson's General Store today. Physical deterioration continues. Skin has developed a translucent quality similar to that described in Elizabeth, and movement suggests joint pain or structural alterations. Most concerning was the momentary glimpse of his forearm when reaching for purchases. The skin appeared to ripple independently of muscle movement, and the veins visible beneath displayed a pattern of branching inconsistent with normal human vasculature. When asked directly what he meant, Williams appeared to realize that he had spoken too freely. He left his purchases behind and left right away. "I confess, the encounter has left me deeply unsettled," said Miller, particularly his parting words. "When the well is finally opened completely, distance will mean nothing. It will flow wherever it wishes, and all waters will carry its voice." In December 1887, Reverend Isaiah Blackwood conducted welfare checks on distant estates after a major snowstorm cut off a large portion of Shannon County for about 2 weeks. The Reverend's group arrived at the Williams cabin and discovered it to be seemingly deserted as there were no footprints in the snow around it, but smoke rose from the chimney, indicating that it had been inhabited recently. According to the Reverend's story, which has been kept in church records, Josiah eventually showed up at the door after several knocks, denying the party entry and stating that his family was doing well. Although this detail was left out of the official church record and only surfaced in Dr. Pritchard's interviews, the Reverend noted that Josiah's clothing was damp and had an odd mineral smell, not unlike the sulfur springs to the south. One party member claimed to have heard what sounded like chains moving beneath the floorboards before leaving. The church record does not include all of the observations found in Reverend Blackwood's personal journal, which was found after his death in 1902. Williams's eyes have developed a peculiar clarity, almost luminous in dim light. When questioned directly about his family's welfare, he responded with phrases that approached but never quite achieved sense. "They're deeper in understanding now, and Thomas shows us the way down." When asked specifically about the infant, Williams corrected me. "Not an infant for many years now." Thomas grows differently than expected. Most disturbing was the momentary glimpse I caught of someone or something moving behind Williams in the cabin's dim interior. The figure appeared too tall for a child, its proportions somehow wrong, its movements jerking and fluid simultaneously. When I inquired who else was present, Williams closed the door halfway and stated, "Only family remains. What's in the well has made sure of that." Then he noticed something odd. The Reverend apparently discussed his concerns with Sheriff Consincade, but no formal investigation was started. Even though the surrounding forest was completely covered with snow, a clear path extended from the cabin in the direction I knew the well to lie, approximately a quarter-mile distant, which showed no footprints, yet was entirely clear of snow, as if the ground itself emanated enough heat to prevent accumulation. According to church documents, Blackwood tried to start a prayer circle for the Williams family in January 1888, but was unable to get any volunteers, indicating that there was a growing community consensus to stay away from the more remote homestead. Josiah's town visits become increasingly irregular and infrequent during 1888. Months without appearances are followed by several visits in quick succession, according to merchant records. Numerous witnesses observed his physical decline, describing significant weight loss, discoloration of the skin, and impaired coordination, which are signs of acute starvation or illness. Despite this, he refused medical help and all offers of support. Josiah's actions during his last known visit to Eminence in March 1889, revealed a serious psychological disorder. Multiple witnesses said that he entered Thompson's general store just before it closed, soaked even though there had been no rain that day, and tried to buy significantly more salt than the store had on hand. He reportedly became agitated when told of this restriction, insisting that the barrier weakens without it, and what comes through needs containment. According to store clerk Jonathan Hayes, Williams continuously spoke to himself in an undertone, fragments of what sounded like instructions or warnings. His hands trembled constantly, and he repeatedly touched a strange stone pendant around his neck, similar to river rock but with unnatural veining. Before leaving, Williams reportedly went straight to Hayes and took his wrist with startling force. "When they find us gone, they will look below. Tell them not to follow the tunnel to its end. What waits there is older than this land, older than any land. It wears us like clothing and learns our shape, and it is so very hungry for new voices," Hayes told Sheriff Conson Cade, describing Williams' sudden clarity. Williams was never seen in Eminence again after leaving the town right away. When a traveling peddler called Michael Collins made a stop at the Williams Ranch in April 1889, it was the most important event. Collins looked around the cabin and found the notorious well in the clearing, but no one was answering, despite indications of occupation. Collins swore to the Shannon County Sheriff that he was lured to the well by a sound that sounded like someone humming or moaning from deep within the earth. Collins said that as he got closer to the well, he saw something moving in the darkness below, with limbs too long and joints bent wrong, slithering away from the light into some hidden recess. Collins was so disturbed that he left right away to report his discovery to Eminence. Collins' statement went on to include information that was kept in Dr. Pritchard's notes but withheld from official documents. The movement below wasn't like anything natural. It flowed rather than crawled but wasn't liquid. It had too many limbs, and they bent in ways limbs shouldn't. But worst was the face, if you could call it that. It had features in the right places, but they weren't right features, and it knew I was watching. It smiled up at me with too many teeth, and I swear it spoke my name, though I never told a soul out there who I was. The next day, Sheriff Thomas Quincaid put together a 3-man crew to conduct an investigation despite the apparent hesitancy that was recorded in his private letter. They discovered evidence of a hurried departure and the cabin door hanging open when they arrived at the site. The house seemed very regular from the inside. However, the men noticed a strange trap door in the floor of the newer part that was locked with several locks. They managed to get past these and found a little tunnel that seemed to go toward the well. According to the sheriff's official report, the tunnel was investigated and found to contain no persons or remains. However, Dr. Pritchard's discovery of his private correspondence with the county judge reveals a different scenario. The passage extends approximately 200 yards underground, eventually opening into a larger chamber that appears to have been excavated gradually over many years. The chamber contains evidence of habitation, including bedding, clothing, and personal effects that suggest long-term confinement of at least one individual. Most disturbing were the chains fixed to the wall and unusual markings scratched into the stone, not letters or words, but patterns that defy description and cause discomfort when viewed directly. The chamber connects to the bottom of the well through a narrow vertical shaft. What we found in the well itself, I hesitate to commit to writing. The water, which extends to unknown depth, is not water at all, but rather a clear fluid that burns the skin upon contact. It produces no vapor, even when a torch is held to its surface, yet it reflects no light. Objects dropped into it disappear, without sound. Most troubling was the discovery of numerous small bundles, similar to that described in the Thompson testimony. Cloth packages containing what appears to be food, some recently deposited, others in various states of dissolution. At the fluid's edge, Deputy Hayes observed that the stone lining of the well does not appear to be mortared in conventional fashion. Rather, the stones seem to have grown together, with no visible seams between them. The interior surface is smooth to touch, despite appearing rough visually, an effect Hayes described as misleading the eye. Most disturbing of all was the discovery in a small alcove carved into the chamber wall of what appeared to be a journal, written in Martha Williams' hand. The text alternates between lucid descriptions of daily life and passages in an unrecognizable script. Those portions, written in English, describe a progressive transformation affecting first the infant Thomas, then Elizabeth, and finally Samuel, a process referred to only as the adaptation. The final legible entry, dated approximately 1 week ago, reads, "Josiah resists still. Though he brings the offerings as required, he does not understand that resistance only prolongs the process. What comes through the well cannot be stopped, now that it has tasted us. The children have shown me the beauty in surrender. Soon we will all be suitable vessels." During our investigation, all members of the party experienced unusual physical sensations, persistent vertigo, visual disturbances, and what Hayes described as a pressure at the base of the skull, as if something were attempting to enter. These effects intensified with proximity to the well and lingered for several hours after our departure from the property. We found no trace of the Williams family, though evidence suggests they fled no more than a day before our arrival. I have ordered the well sealed with concrete and the tunnel collapsed. I recommend all records of this investigation be restricted to prevent panic and preserve the peace of mind of our community. I further recommend that the property be quarantined and no future settlement permitted on that parcel. The incident that happened while the men were getting ready to seal the well was what Sheriff Kincaid left out of even this private narrative, which was only made public decades later by Dr. Pritchard's discussion with the sheriff's son. This account claims that a sound, like to hundreds of voices crying out in unison, came from the depths when the first bucket of concrete was poured, and that the liquid in the well rose upward against gravity, stretching out toward the men. The assertion that one of these tendrils briefly formed was the most unsettling. The transparent fluid took the shape of a child's face, which could be identified as a daguerreotype of Thomas Williams that was discovered in the cabin. According to reports, the face spoke, although it was in no human language, before it was struck by the concrete and fell back into the well. 3 months following this probe, Sheriff Kincaid resigned, according to county records, and moved to Kansas without providing a forwarding address. In June 1889, Deputy Hayes, his successor, ordered all Williams case-related documents sealed. Due to unpaid taxes, the county subsequently regained title of the abandoned property. In the months that followed, the individuals who took part in the inquiry apparently had a variety of ailments. According to his son's testimony, Sheriff Kincaid himself developed patches of skin with unusual properties, translucent in certain light, and marked with vein patterns that did not correspond to normal human vasculature. He reportedly kept these areas covered at all times and insisted on being buried rather than cremated, so that the earth might contain what he had become. Another person reported persistent dreams in which he found himself looking out through eyes that were not his own, from beneath dark water. Although some witnesses stated that the fire appeared to avoid the area around the well, despite efforts to focus the burning there, a controlled burn was ordered in 1902 to cleanse the property. One had tremors that made it impossible to work further. In a statement provided to the Eminence Courier but never published, one forestry worker stated that the fire crawled away from that clearing like it was alive and afraid. Joseph Matz, the worker, explained in a private letter found by Dr. Pritchard, "I've worked forest management for 20 years and never seen fire behave as it did near that old well. Flames would approach the clearing, then split and go around, like water flowing around a stone. When we tried to push burning debris directly into the area with poles, the wood smoldered and went out as soon as it crossed some invisible boundary. The supervisor finally ordered us to leave that section untouched, and as we left, I swear I heard something like laughter coming from the direction of the well, not human laughter, but the sound water might make if it learned to express amusement." The former Williams property remained vacant and mostly shunned by the local population for the following 20 years. Despite being close to hunting areas and logging roads, the location is unmarked on maps from this era. Local legends centered on cautions to stay away from the place where the well waits, but the public's recollection of the Williams case diluted. It's unclear if this occurred naturally or as a result of deliberate suppression of oral history. According to a number of recorded occurrences, the region may have retained its peculiar characteristics. One hunting party in 1916 described being lost close to the old Williams property, experiencing lost time during which they had no memory but traveled approximately 2 miles. In the days that followed, all 4 men experienced strange symptoms, including persistent thirst, light sensitivity, and what the local doctor called nervous exhaustion. One hunter later reported finding a smooth stone with moving veins in his pocket, but he had no recollection of gathering it. Despite moderate temperatures that winter, the current river apparently saw unusual freezing patterns after the stone was tossed into it. Although official records make no note of it, a civilian conservation corps team studying the area for potential development in 1927 reported finding the well with its concrete seal cracked. After that, 3 team members asked to be transferred, and the planned development was abruptly stopped for no apparent reason. Pritchard 1959 reported that Burnett experienced persistent auditory hallucinations of voices calling from below ground and delusions of progressive physical transformation. Burnett's case notes describe his belief that something is moving beneath my skin, reorganizing me from within, and his insistence that water from any source was full of voices waiting to be heard. What is most unsettling is his claim that he continued to communicate with the Williams child, Thomas, who had completed his transformation and now exists as a conduit between worlds. Burnett's physical condition deteriorated in unusual ways, according to nursing notes. His joints became more flexible, his skin took on a translucent appearance, and he displayed unusual patterns of venous structure visible beneath the skin. The attending physician reported that Burnett's body had unusual post-mortem characteristics, such as delayed rigor mortis and movement beneath the skin surface consistent with gas formation, though occurring much earlier than typical decomposition would explain. Perhaps most unsettling was the orderly's report that when Burnett's body was washed before burial, the water ran off in a manner inconsistent with normal surface tension, appearing to form momentary patterns before blowing away. Burnett was discovered dead in his room in 1932, as the official cause of death was listed as heart failure. A University of Missouri Geological Survey team mapped the water table in Shannon County in 1938. One team member, Edward Burnett, later committed himself to the State Psychiatric Hospital in Farmington, Missouri, where his medical records, accessed by Dr. Pritchard, reveal his equipment registered unusual readings near the former Williams property. A depression in the water table, forming a distinct funnel pattern centered on the approximate location of the well. The lead geologist, Dr. Samuel Winters, noted that such a formation was inconsistent with known hydrological principles and suggested either equipment malfunction or the presence of an unknown subsurface structure. When the team attempted to investigate further, they reportedly experienced equipment failures and unusual psychological effects, including disorientation and what Winters described as a shared auditory hallucination of distant voices speaking in unison. The survey was ultimately abandoned, with official reports attributing the anomalous readings to instrument error due to mineral deposits in the region. Dr. Winters, however, continued private research into the area, corresponding with colleagues at various institutions regarding what he termed hydrological anomalies in the western Ozarks. His papers, archived at the university but restricted from general access until 1980, include speculations about potential non-standard properties of groundwater in isolated systems, and references to folkloric accounts of waters with transformative properties. Most intriguing is a letter to Enplady, a colleague at Harvard dated 1,944 inches, which Winters writes, The incident in Shannon County continues to disturb my scientific understanding. Water by its nature should not behave as that survey suggested. I have developed a hypothesis that what we encountered was not water at all, but rather something mimicking its properties while exhibiting fundamentally different molecular behavior. The implications are simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. If a substance could manipulate atomic bonds to simulate another while maintaining different core properties, the applications would be revolutionary. But I cannot shake the sense that what flows beneath that particular ground is not a passive substance awaiting discovery and utilization, but rather something with agency and intent. Winters abandoned his academic career shortly thereafter, citing health concerns. After his death in 1951, his personal journal was found, and it shows that he had begun to experience symptoms that others who had known the Williams well had also reported: unusual light sensitivity, chronic thirst, and what he called a persistent sensation of movement beneath my skin, particularly along venous pathways. There is an unsettling postscript in Dr. Pritchard's last notes, which were written in October 1961. He found an old woman in Springfield, Missouri, who claimed to be Ezekiel Thompson's niece after tracking down relatives of the original Williams's neighbors. Pritchard's transcription states that the woman related a story her uncle had only told once, just before he passed away. Uncle Zeke said he knew why the Williams dug that well where they did. Said Josiah confided in him during the worst of the drought. That spot was where their firstborn had been buried, a child born before Elizabeth that didn't survive. Josiah claimed that 3 nights after the burial, he heard crying from the grave. When he dug it up, the coffin was empty, but the crying seemed to come from deeper in the earth. He kept digging for days until he hit water. But what came up wasn't water, and what looked back at him wasn't his child, though it knew his name and called him father. Uncle Zeke said he asked what it was, and Josiah just said, something that wasn't supposed to be there. Something that was under the ground before we ever came. The woman further recalled that her uncle had maintained unusual habits until his death. He would never drink standing water, only running water, and always poured the first portion onto the ground, as if feeding something. He refused to have mirrors in his house and insisted on windows being covered at night so it can't see in. Most peculiar was his habit of carrying a smooth river stone with a distinctive veining in his pocket at all times, replacing it with a new one if lost. That's when he covered the well and moved the family away from Illinois, but it followed them somehow, calling to them. He built the new well because it needed to be fed. Those were his words. When asked about this practice, he reportedly said only, "It remembers me, and that's better than being forgotten." In December 1961, Dr. Pritchard's studies came to an abrupt stop. According to university records, he took a medical leave of absence and never came back to work. In 1962, the Missouri Historical Society requested that his collection of records pertaining to the Williams case be archived and kept out of the public domain. The justification given was preservation of materials, but no particular conservation concerns were mentioned. Margaret Wilson, the archiving librarian who processed Pritchard's collection, later reported discovering a sealed envelope among the materials. Addressed to whoever continues this research, Wilson stated in a 1965 interview with a graduate student that the contents of the envelope, a single page of handwritten text, disturbed her so profoundly that she resealed it and deliberately misfiled it to prevent discovery. According to Wilson's personnel file, which later researchers were able to access, she requested transfer from the archival department shortly after due to health concerns. Treatment for recurrent parasomnia and tactile hallucinations, which largely impact the vascular system, is documented in her later medical records. The attending physician noted her description of sensations of movement beneath the skin, following venous pathways, and her persistent belief that water sources are contaminated with an unspecified agent capable of altering human physiology. In a particularly disturbing session documented in her psychiatric evaluation, Wilson reportedly stated, "It gets in through the water, but it's not the water." When pressed for details about the document's contents, Wilson would say only that it contained a warning and coordinates that she had memorized specifically to avoid ever approaching that location. "It's something in the water that learns to become you from the inside out, and it's patient, so patient. I haven't had a drink in 3 days, but I can still feel it moving inside me, mapping my vessels, learning the pathways of my body. It's been hiding in that well for so long, but it's found other ways out now." The Williams family was just the beginning. Wilson was eventually committed to the state psychiatric hospital, where she remained until her death in 1971. The reason given was dehydration resulting from self-imposed water restriction. Workers discovered what seemed to be a stone-lined hole in 1968 while building a forestry service road close to the former Williams property. While county officials looked into the matter, work was temporarily suspended. No unusual features or materials were mentioned in the official report, which just describes the structure as a defunct well of standard construction that was filled in for safety reasons. However, in an interview with the local newspaper, one worker described the liquid at the bottom of the shaft as clear as glass, but heavy as mercury. He also said that when his measuring line was removed from the well, it came up clean, too clean, like nothing had touched it at all. The worker asked to be reassigned the next day. All 6 of the men who had direct access to the well site left the Forestry Service within a month. An interested local reporter followed up, but none could be found at the addresses they provided. There was no formal justification for the half-mile detour caused by the road construction. Geological survey maps from 1970 indicate that the region is unstable ground, unsuitable for development, even though there is no proof of testing to back up this claim. Unusual hydrological events were observed in Shannon County in 1971, including diminished output from wells, sporadic spring flow, and multiple reports of clear, odorless liquid leaking from seemingly dry ground. The County Water Authority explained these occurrences as seasonal fluctuations in the water table, even though there was no notable drought or rainfall during this time. Among the most alarming were 3 distinct medical cases reported to the county health department. Patients admitted to the hospital with symptoms such as persistent thirst, blurred vision, and what one doctor called apparent movement beneath the skin along venous pathways. All 3 patients drank from private wells located in the western part of the county. All 3 patients were eventually moved to facilities outside the county, and there is no follow-up documentation in local records. Laboratory analysis of water samples from these sources revealed no biological or chemical contamination, although one technician reported that the samples behaved unusually in storage, maintaining temperature inconsistent with ambient conditions. Later researchers, however, found a nursing note in one file that references the patient's reports of voices speaking from the water faucet at night, calling my name, and promising transformation. Official documents purposefully obfuscate the Williams property's precise location. Their homestead is not included on current maps of Shannon County, and the location where most sources located is now unmarked and mainly unexplored territory inside the Mark Twain National Forest. An unwritten policy instructing rangers to discourage hikers from exploring certain unmarked sections of the western forest without giving explicit justifications is revealed in Forest Service internal notes that were acquired through Freedom of Information requests in 1978. As part of a larger investigation into 19th century frontier communities, Robert Chen, an archaeology student at the University of Missouri, made an effort to find the Williams site in 1982. 3 weeks after his disappearance, his field notes were discovered amid his abandoned equipment and include unsettling remarks. Located probable Williams homestead based on triangulation from surviving landmarks mentioned in Pritchard's papers. Foundation stones match period construction. Considerable soil subsidence in area where a cabin addition would have stood. Most significant find: located circular stone structure, approximately 250 yards from cabin site, matching description of the well. Structure appears partially collapsed, but opening still visible. No water visible from surface, but depth measurement using weighted line indicates at least 40 feet to any obstruction. Unusual sound noted emanating from well, not water movement, but rather a rhythmic vibration that can be felt through the ground surrounding the structure. Recording equipment malfunctioning in vicinity. Day 3. Located entrance to what appears to be a tunnel, leading from cabin foundation toward well. Partially collapsed but navigable. We'll explore tomorrow with proper equipment. Day 4. Located chamber described in sheriff's report. Wall markings still visible, though eroded. Patterns seem to shift when not directly observed. Experiencing strong headache and unusual auditory phenomena. Sound like distant human voices speaking in unison. Something moving in the well, not water. Something solid but fluid simultaneously. Lowered camera, but film exposed to light somehow, despite waterproof casing. Be watched constantly. Something scratching inside my tent at night. Day 7. Dreams of voices calling from below. They know my name now. Found strange, clear liquid, seeping from ground near my campsite. Burns skin on contact, but leaves no mark after pain subsides. The tunnel extends deeper than indicated in historical accounts. Found new chamber below first. Walls appear to have been scraped by something with multiple points of contact. Found what appears to be clothing embedded in wall material. Not deposited but grown over somehow. Day 8. I understand now why they stayed. Why they changed. It's beautiful once you stop fighting. What waits below is older than humanity. Older than the ground itself. It wears us like we wear clothing. I've seen Thomas. He's still here. Still changing. Still becoming Elizab. The final entry ends mid-word. An comprehensive search was conducted, but Chen's body was never found. While in the search area, the investigating officers reported experiencing unexpected equipment issues, such as battery failures, radio interference, and compass malfunctions. The search team member, speaking anonymously to a graduate student studying the Williams case in 1984, described finding Chen's campsite in perfect order, as if he had simply walked away. Most unsettling was the finding of dozens of small river stones arranged in a spiral pattern near the tent, each with unusual veining that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. The case was officially classified as a probable animal attack, and the area was later declared off-limits for archaeological research due to environmental sensitivity. Some team members reported hearing voices calling their names from the direction of the old well site, and 3 reported experiencing what a medic called tactile hallucinations of movement beneath their skin. The team member stated that the search was halted not because there was no evidence, but because something was affecting the team psychologically. About 3 miles from the alleged Williams property, a hunting party reported discovering what looked to be human remains in 1987. DNA testing, which is still in its infancy, produced inconclusive findings, but forensic examination identified the remains as those of an adult male with skeletal deformities that the medical examiner's report described as consistent with severe physical deformity or post-mortem manipulation. When no family came forward to claim the remains, they were finally interred in an unmarked cemetery. Details left out of public documents are included in the full report of the medical examiner, which was acquired in 1995 through Freedom of Information petitions. Cranial structure includes unexplained additional foramina openings at the base of the skull. Skeletal structure displays unusual characteristics, inconsistent with documented human anatomical flair. Variation. Long bones of the arms and legs exhibit additional articulation points not corresponding to normal human joints. Most significant is the altered vertebral configuration, with 7 additional vertebrae of unusual morphology. These abnormalities suggest either elaborate post-mortem modification or a congenital condition not documented in medical literature. A soil sample taken from the remains contained traces of an unidentified, clear, viscous substance that resisted standard chemical analysis. The report ends by recommending that more research be done by comparative anatomy experts but there is no record of such follow-up in accessible archives. In 1995, a family hiking in the western part of Mark Twain National Forest reported getting lost and spending the night next to an ancient stone circle in the earth. This was the most recent event related to the Williams case that was documented. The next day, they told park rangers that they had heard voices from below and that their 6-year-old daughter was talking to the people under the stones. The family received basic dehydration treatment, and their report was submitted without any further investigation. Prior to the family's experience, Pritchard's research revealed that the daughter had filled her water bottle with what the parents described as a small seep of clear water near the stone circle. Both parents reported experiencing unusual symptoms in her water bottle. The days after their rescue, including persistent thirst, light sensitivity, and what their doctor described as visual disturbances, primarily affecting perception of their daughter. The mother's private journal, shared with researchers in 2001, details increasingly unsettling observations. Emily speaks differently now. Her vocabulary has expanded dramatically, and she uses phrases and references no 6-year-old should know. What emerged only through a doctor last night, I found her in the bathroom holding a conversation with her reflection in the mirror, except the reflection's mouth wasn't moving in time with hers. When I asked who she was talking to, she said, "Thomas says not to worry. The changing doesn't hurt once you stop fighting it. We've never known anyone named Thomas." The family moved to Colorado shortly afterwards, and subsequent attempts to reach them have failed. Their old doctor said their medical records were sent to an institution that specializes in rare physiological disorders, but he would not elaborate. In private conversations, park rangers who are familiar with the western forest portion describe dead zones, where flora grows unusually densely and animals is conspicuously missing. Numerous people have complained of equipment malfunctions and confusion in particular locations that are not shown on official maps. There are unofficial warnings in ranger training to avoid certain landmarks, including any stone circle that looks like it might have been a well. In 2005, a retired ranger interviewed for an unfinished documentary recounted an incident in 1998 when he was patrolling close to the suspected Williams property location and spotted a figure watching from the tree line. It was tall, too tall for normal human proportions, and moved in a way that suggested too many joints. When I called out, it retreated into the trees with a fluid motion, more like flowing than walking. I followed briefly but stopped when I noticed clear liquid seeping from the ground where it had stood. Not water, something thicker that seemed to move against gravity, flowing uphill toward me. The ranger asked to be moved to a different forest the next morning. He claimed that while he was retired, he had frequent dreams in which voices call from every water source, faucets, toilets, even condensation on windows, always promising to show what we can become if we surrender to the deeper currents. It is undeniable that a cabin once stood somewhere in the western Ozarks, and close to that cabin was a well that was unlike any other one whose contents defied the rules of nature as they were understood in 1889. And even today, it may be prudent to leave open the questions of whether that well has actually been shut and whether whatever was inside it has been confined. If you think this story is just legend, keep in mind this. The Shannon County Courthouse experienced an odd graffiti event in 1968. The original deed to Josiah Williams' land was the only document taken by the intruder who broke into the records room. The night watchman claimed to have seen a tall, unusually skinny figure leave the premises, but the robbery was never investigated. There was only a tiny pool of clear, odorless liquid that had vanished by morning after the figure seemed to simply sink into the ground close to the courtroom steps when it was pursued. Although he had no memory of gathering such an item, the county clerk who reported the theft allegedly discovered a smooth river stone with peculiar veining on his desk the next morning. He had asked for a longer leave of absence due to health concerns within a week. He never went back to his job and was eventually admitted to a care facility in Springfield, where records show he refused all water for the final 3 days of his life, repeating only, "It's in the water, but it's not the water. It's what the water becomes when it learns to think." His doctor's notes record complaints of persistent thirst and sensations of movement beneath the skin following vascular pathways. Because it raises questions about the boundaries of our knowledge, not only of the natural world, but also of what might exist in areas we cannot or will not see. The Williams Well continues to rank among the most unsettling cases in Ozark history. Their narrative serves as a reminder that some mysteries are impossible to solve not because there is insufficient proof, but rather because the reality is too hard to believe. Every few years, someone in Shannon County discovers an inexplicable clear liquid leaking from undisturbed ground or reports hearing a peculiar humming sound deep in the forest. Authorities in the area blame these instances on either hyperactive imaginations or natural springs. In some parts of the Mark Twain National Forest, they warn hikers against going too far because of sinkholes and unstable terrain. Maybe they're correct. It's best to keep some secrets hidden. It's best to keep certain wells sealed, because something might yet be lurking in the shadowy areas beneath the Ozark Mountains, something that understands the value of human attention and gets stronger every time it tells its tale. If you ever find yourself trekking those isolated hills, pay close attention. In certain locations, the sound of the ground beneath your feet is different, expectant, and hollow. Additionally, avoid lingering if you hear what sounds like buzzing from far below. Don't look for its origin. And in any case, do not dig if you come upon a clearing where nothing grows and the air is silent and heavy with expectation. Water can be reached by some wells. Others go far, far deeper.